Welcome, Amina.
Thank you, Alina. Hi.
It's so lovely to have you here, actually. And we sort of very briefly, we've got a few technical issues, but I'm sure we'll all be fine. And I would love to, well, introduce you as a sort of Chief Liberation Officer, but I'd love for you to do that in an audacious way.
Audacious way. And what's the chief pointer for audacious? Is it like bold?
Well, it's bold, courageous, care. Actually, it is courageous, caring, non-conforming, and I'm sure you've got all of those in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. The word that comes is guide. Officially, the title was coach, but coaching seems to have a quality of too much pressure these days, associated with performance coaching. So I think guide for people who are on a similar journey and maybe I'm just like 2 steps ahead. Just being with people where they are, helping them make sense of their situation, whether it's leadership, career transition, or creating a life that's more aligned, and helping them undo old thinking and allow new possibilities to come through and take small steps.
Thank you. But I'm curious as well. I mean, I know for the audience who doesn't know you yet, it would be great to give a little bit of a background, and because it's a fascinating background that you have and how you ended up becoming the Chief Liberation Officer.
Thank you. And I think we have a similar journey. I was telling someone I was having a conversation with before we did that we had a similar journey of sometimes I call it cultural adaptation. So moving from one country to another, from one culture to another, from one economic system to another. And essentially, landing and making sense and finding the steps forward to contribute, to express one's abilities and gifts in a way that's useful, whilst thriving and enjoying the amazing thing called life. So I started off born in Algeria, which is in North Africa, moved to the UK when I was young for 3 years with my parents, moved back to Algeria, and there was a civil war, moved back to the UK. So that brought its own learnings and intensities and challenges and abilities of adaptation. Adapter A, right? Your company's called Adapter A. And somewhere at school, I realized I didn't want to just be a scientist, which I was good at. I was good at maths and science. I wanted also something to do with people, with community. And so medicine became the thing. So I went to medical school at Cambridge and learned so much. Had twists and turns in terms of identity, kind of the self being created from adolescence to adulthood, and eventually found my way to public health. So I didn't want to be a science, basic science doctor. I wanted to actually work on policy on the big picture. And so that defined the first chunk of my career. So working in hospitals, working in the UK, in Switzerland, and in South Sudan with Médecins Sans Frontières, which was a really defining experience for me, seeing what it's like to live in extreme conditions of deprivation, of poverty, of violence, if there was a war. And then coming back to the UK and starting this journey on the policy of public health journey, so influencing policy, not just working in a hospital as a doctor. And that brought me to my dream at the time, which was working at the UN level with the World Health Organization, United Nations. It was a seminal year in 2015 where big frameworks were being redefined, like the Sustainable Development Goals were being put in place, the new version. It used to be the Millennium Development Goals, the Disaster Risk Reduction Framework, Sendai Framework. And those were the two main ones. And it was amazing. And somewhere along the line, something started speaking and saying, you're going to be done with this soon, which was so confusing because to me, this was my life. That was it. That was my life path. I was so happy, but something said, no, that's not it. And then there was a lot of confusion. There was some anguish. Maybe it was a career crisis, but it was maybe mild to moderate. And then I ended up saying, okay, I just won't apply for the next job, which was, not in the plan. Yeah, and one day I just walked out of the role I had at the time and didn't apply for the next one, and just ended up in a very different mindset space. Now, I had always had a passion for psychology, sociology, coaching. I'd come across Tony Robbins when I was a teenager, and just was known for like the woman, the weird one who had a self-help shelf in her little student room and lots of self-help books. And I did consider psychology, psychiatry, but I realized it wasn't quite the thing. And I figured out later why, but won't go into it here. But when I had my little career crisis, then I realized, there's a thing called coaching that allows both to work independently as an entrepreneur or solopreneur, and to bring together different strands. So that's how I ended up sort of guiding professionals, leaders, high achievers who are asking questions about their path to recreate, unfold into a new version of life. Now, does that bring us up to date? Maybe I'll say I wrote a book, The Success Trap: Why Good People Stay in Jobs They Don't Like and How to Break Free. And I do some things that maybe we'll talk about later: writing, speaking, coaching one-to-one and in small groups.
Fabulous. Well, that is definitely audacious. I think even just listening to you, and it's interesting to notice from the outside in, as the high achiever that I know that you are, how much you sort of minimize some of these achievements. Oh yeah, and I remember I also wrote a book. But one of the things I think that really is almost stirring my curiosity right now, I think is that link or that work in identity. Because obviously you had so many identities and you've changed identities from doing some of this extraordinary work, as you said, with Médecins Sans Frontières in Sudan and, in some of these incredible places, and then doing, coming back in the UK and doing policy work, and now doing what you're doing today. That's sort of the thread to me. There is a change of identity, and yet there is also a commonality to it all. So I'm curious to hear your view on identity work.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a profound question. And I find it's one that we don't address a lot in the coaching industry, but it's so important. It's worth having a conversation about without necessarily going into sort of therapy territory, because it overlaps also with what happens in therapy and other modalities. So I guess we call it mindset work, but I think it's more than that. It is that, and it has some other aspects to it. I'm not sure where to start. Is there something specific that you were thinking about?
No, I think it was more sort of curious because I know, as I said, even changing identities, it is sort of mindset work, as you said, and maybe to bring it a bit more into on earth, as I call it, under this umbrella of audacity. For me, it's like, is it courage, is it care, is it sort of non-conformity? It's what's also not spurred it for me is you was before we started the conversation, so the conversation under the conversation between we went live, you said, well, there is another identity shift, Alina, and we left it there, so we were hanging. And I know we said we're going to immerse, we don't have an agenda, and you didn't have a plan to not apply for a job. We didn't have a plan as we came in. It's just I got really intrigued when you mentioned that.
Yeah, I'm still figuring it out. So I feel like the high achiever in me is like, I don't have like the potted answer, So it feels like messy, but I can give it a try. So I think maybe around the high achiever persona that high achievers hacked love in a way, that they found that they could get something that's like love, like appreciation or acknowledgement or rewards, validation of some kind, by excelling in things that they already maybe have some talent with, or that they develop. So intellectual ability, doing well at school, and suddenly you find, oh, this is how I meet my need for love, or my need for connection, or need for belonging. Usually there's kind of heart emotional experiences that we're trying to meet through achievement. And I think there are layers that drop. And there are other layers that come in, like cultural layers, because being a high achiever in one culture might be different to another culture. And I think you have this in common with me, that I have different cultures within me, or different codes of conduct. So one culture might value independence, the other values community orientation. And it can be quite confusing figuring all that out. So in terms of identity for me, I remember there was a time when I started working in the UK in the NHS, I started changing my accent and my way of speaking, because I realized I could have more impact, and I could get tests from my patients more easily with a certain way of communicating. And to me, that is an identity shift, because I'm taking on certain behaviors, certain codes of conduct that I didn't have, to achieve something. And then what happens is you sort of forget, like there's a part of you that forgets some other part of your identity, because there's only so much room in your mind and your heart to live and process and engage with life. So I feel like something's shifting, like some codes of conduct are maybe dropping a little. So things are more immediate, less performative. I don't know if that means I'm going to start speaking with an Algerian accent or a French accent. I don't know what it means. But I think it'll mean at least this, a more willingness to be vulnerable in relationship. What do I mean by that? So for me, my spiritual practice, or my meditation, the practice of within the Buddhist tradition of insight, has helped me a lot, but it's been mostly secluded, in retreat. And what I've been exploring the last 2 or 3 years is how to also be have that openness that I have on my meditation cushion with people. And it's not easy, because I've learned my codes of conduct around performance, around doing the right thing, around sometimes it's pleasing people. It's like, how can I get this person to like me and want to work with me, or want to be with me, or whatever. But it can also be, how can I give the best, presentation, or give a kick-ass interview, or have a great conversation with Alina that everybody loves and shares. So I think there's something around the willingness to fail, to not be liked, to show messiness, to show emotions that aren't necessarily prized.
I love that. Because actually it is interesting, because as you said, it's sort of messy, and it's that willingness to still be okay with a bit of messiness, which I have to admit to, I am still struggling. And when you shift identity, you literally do shed a certain way of being, as you call it, this sort of rules of conduct. As for me, as I was in the corporate world, there was a certain way of behaving, and then you come out of that, and you just leave that behind, and you have to relearn how to behave as an entrepreneur, which is completely different. And so it is fascinating to play with one identity and maybe transitioning to another. And what's coming up to me, I mean, you and I, what we've got in common is the 4PC, belonging to that community, and playing with it. And last week we had our usual half a year we meet in a wonderful place. So this time was Pasadena in LA, and it was phenomenal. Talking about failure, because one of the trips we had was to NASA. I mean, and they take 100-year view, a 50-year view, and they have to constantly fail. They were saying 5 out of 7 missions to Mars, Venus, they failed. And they have to work on projects for 7 years at a time. So don't give up, in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 7 weeks. And the other thing that's coming to me is, Reach set this challenge for all of us at the beginning to do something different from what we normally do. So what would Amina not do? What the no Amina, or what would Alina not do? So I am an extreme extrovert. So I love to just go and stay within the big groups. And so I chose to be the opposite. I chose to be the introvert, to reflect, to be on my own. And I have to say that was very edgy. And yet that was quite liberating, to use your sort of chief liberating officer. There was a liberation that came to it, that I could also be an introvert if I chose to.
Wow. I wish I'd seen that. How did it feel?
Well, it was felt edgy, and it's interesting because we do, there were new members of 4PC. They only just joined. And then it was interesting that one, we were talking about this on the very last day, and she said to me, well, Alina, I had no idea, because she didn't know the previous version of me in the previous intensives. She only knew the Alina that was there last week. That's or almost the non-Alina, which more introverted. And I thought that's interesting, because we obviously make that perception, that image on the behavior that we experience at one point in time. So I'm sort of dancing. And the other thing that there were 3 wonderful leadership experiences, I call them, because I sort of apply them through that audacious leadership lens for me. So one was a tango lesson. The other one was the trip to NASA. And the third one was spending one day at Wolf Connection with the wolves. And I actually wrote about it in my latest newsletter, which came out on LinkedIn yesterday. And I know you've got your own newsletter, which I'd love to talk about that if we have a moment. But again, the tango was fascinating, because I never knew that tango is one of the most difficult dance to learn.
Yeah, I've done a bit of tango, so I understand what you're talking about.
Well, I'd love to know your take on that. And tell you what I've learned from it is that it has to be a very clear distinction between the leader and the follower. That's what I've also learned from Sally. So and the leader has to be very clear. So the clarity of movement, it's paramount. So then the follower can go left, right, backwards, forwards. And the follower is not passive. The follower really sort of needs to feel the energy of the leader. And probably one of the biggest insights for me is pausing is a move. Was like, for someone like me, is like, there is power in the pause.
Yeah, absolutely. How beautiful.
So I know you were sort of, I mean, what from what you know of tango, which I know very little except this one day, what would you say are some of the other lessons, insights?
Yeah, I was so first of all, I started tango after a breakup, because I'd heard from a friend that there was a lot of connection, and I thought, okay, I'll just replace that with the tango connection. And it worked, actually, because there's a lot of intimacy, because you're very close to someone, and so you have to be very connected and attuned. So I remember this principle of balance, that there has to be a firm frame. So like you said, the follower isn't just sort of lying there in the arms of the lead, but they have to create a firm frame, and that there's a balance point, a center of gravity between the two. And so that's kind of part of what creates the shape of the dance, and how the energy is passed on from the leader to the follower and back. The other, so both have to actually contribute and be present and grounded, and have softness and structure. And then there was the sense that, yes, the lead is leading and the follower is following, but the music is guiding. So they're both also listening to the music. So there's something bigger in because I perceive relationships as a triangle. So there's the two people, and then there's the purpose of the relationship that's guiding the relationship. So it struck me as very profound as a set of principles in this dance.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, one of the other partners is the music. I remember Sally saying that. You also have to partner up with the music. Interestingly, so there's a lot of a lot of ingredients to this to make it work, and it looks seamlessly. Is actually takes so much of that presence and that balance and the connection. It's wonderful. Actually, it's really has given me a lot of insight. And on the same in the same structure of presence, I think that day with the wolves for us has been phenomenal to be. And what Theo did, he blindfolded all of us and he put us into the den with the wolves. So again, you have to stay so present and so calm in your in your nervous system, so to actually feel the wolves coming. And then some of them, I think they got kisses. I just got a stroke on my shoulder. Everybody had a different experience, but really to feel the wolves was a phenomenal experience.
That's amazing. So powerful to be connected like that with such animals. With nature.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But I know some of your work is also on presence, because you used to have a program.
Yeah, it's still so the three principles I kind of coach from are presence, power, and possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I describe them in different ways, but presence is essentially being with what is as it is, the sense of receptivity and acceptance, not trying to escape from the reality that we're in. Power is reclaiming agency, exercising choice. So moving from a sort of victimized mindset to a more agent mindset, and then to creator. And then possibility is then engaging with the unknown, leaning into the unknown and the uncertain, and experimenting and playing to create what seems impossible.
Fab. And actually for you, I'm sort of curious, and because I remember, I mean, that's a wonderful, way of looking at it as a sort of program as well. Which one of those three, and it could be any or all, would you relate to any of those sort of three pillars? I mean, pick one: courage, care, or non-conformity.
I think at the moment it's care. A lot of care. I felt a bit tired. I think like a lot of people, and there's so many possible reasons. So I've noticed that bringing more care to this mind, body, to relationships, to environment, to others, really opens up things for me right now. So care.
Yes, care. I mean, absolutely. And then care's got so many different angles, because again, I'm sort of thinking, because it's so fresh, as I only wrote this article, trying for me to find a thread between those three events. But the care for me is also caring about yourself, but also caring about others, caring about mission, but also this attention to detail.
Yeah.
Care,
you mean? Or is this another quality? Sorry, I didn't catch it.
Sorry, say that again. No, I think it's it's the same. It's the same, as I was sort of reflecting on it. And it only came to me as a new angle of caring, sort of caring about, that attentiveness through these three different events. It's also, NASA, how much they look at the detail, caring about the detail in order to go to Mars. In dance, is really caring again about the your partner, or the leader and the following, being so attentive.
You do need to pause, right? You said about the pause is a move, and caring requires us to pause, because we need to take in the other. We need to take in the information from the environment to respond with care. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So I mean, I'm curious, and I know you're saying still you are in the sort of messiness of reinventing yourself right now, Amina.
It might be a permanent feature, because I believe that life is uncertain. We just create structures and things that shield us for a while by, creating a sense of stability. But ultimately, we're always, life is always changing. Change is the only constant.
Absolutely. And you and I were joking a little bit because we've had issues with the technical, and you said to me, Alina, if I drop, just get everybody to meditate. So you almost send me over the edge. It's like, really? Me asking people to meditate? But I'd love to, I suppose, what's the most audacious thing? I'm sort of thinking into just thinking into me. What I wanted to ask, what's the most audacious thing that you have done recently? But my energy almost goes like, what's the most audacious thing that you are secretly still wishing that you want to do?
Well, I have an answer for both.
Great.
So going to Nepal for a month for a co-living and co-working experiment last month. Or was it this month? It was last month into this month. We felt pretty audacious. Just saw a thing online, signed up, and went. And I won't go into the details. And the second one, what I'm secretly is I want to experiment with what I call the modern gift economy. Something in me is just really curious and wanting to see what it's like to offer work, not in exchange for money, so outside the exchange system and inside the gifting or the generosity system. It's pretty bold because, people don't work that way. Most people are confused if you say, give from your heart. I tried it once and the person said, please just send me your invoice. It was with a company. But that's what my heart secretly keeps coming back to. So I'm planning on possibly experimenting with some of my offerings, my work, maybe with the events and the speaking, trying that out. It requires telling people, helping people understand what it means. So it does require effort, but that's what feels edgy.
And exciting. Actually, as I'm feeling the edginess, I'm also feeling the excitement. I'm almost like, oh, I want to hear more. I mean, oh my God, you left it for the very last. And you can't just possibly, I wish, I didn't know. I mean, I forgot. I knew you went to Nepal, but I totally forgotten. And would have been, I would love, I mean, we've still got 3 minutes. I want to hear the biggest insight that you had from that trip.
Oh, gosh. The biggest insight. The biggest insight was dismantling separation and bringing more love. Living from love is really part of the solution to our big problems in the world, if not the core of the solution. And we've just got to find ways to explain it so that people don't go, oh, I don't want to talk about love, let's talk about business.
That feels so audacious. Because for me, of course, it's like, how do you bring that, what I call it, on earth? It's how do you translate that into the business world, which will just get really, what do you mean love, Amina? What do you mean love, Alina? It's like, what does that mean? Just in the business language.
Actually, I had an insight just yesterday about this, listening to someone else called Mickey Kashtan, that having an experience of enoughness is love. It's self-love, it's love for the other, it's love for the planet. We seem to have been deprived of what it feels to just have enough, to be enough, and be happy and content with that. So that to me is a form of love that could really address some of our issues.
Well, and that's a big, big topic. And imagine teaching that.
And I know Mandy later on who has a podcast well enough, so I'm sure she had a few ideas, and of course it's a huge topic.
No, you're right, Mandy. She's got the whole Enough the podcast, but actually teaching that in a way that, because especially in the high achieving, that's how we started, and we're sort of going back full circle for a high achiever to tell them that's enough. It's not what they want to hear.
Fear comes up, and yet it's possible. Wow, you really got us into meatier areas.
We're going to have to do it again, I think, because I would love to go into that meaty of, what does that mean, and actually sort of exploring love in business and enoughness and all of that. But I'm really excited about this new shift, for you to do something with that. So where would, you mentioned the book, you mentioned the newsletter.
I go on LinkedIn if anybody wants to reach out. I'm on LinkedIn. And the newsletter Wise Wednesdays, which I write. I used to write it weekly, a bit less at the moment because I'm going through this shift, and I want to only share things that are coming from love, not from habit or achievement. So Wise Wednesdays at dramina.com, which is my website.
Great. So yeah, subscribe to Amina's Wise Wednesdays for sure, to Audacious Leadership newsletters, both on LinkedIn Live. And I think, for me, this project of, thank you. I haven't actually got it. Thank you. And yes, we now put all of these Audacious conversations on YouTube. I think you're streaming some of it, but for me, it will be edited and it will come.
If you're watching.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being here. And yeah, definitely more food for thought and more to explore in a future conversation, you and I.
Thank you, Alina. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your work. And thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you.